So this is unit 1.5, subsection, let's say like economies of scale. So basically, economies of scale is when your average cost of production decreases due to the fact that your size of an organization's operation is increasing, okay? So when it comes to economies of scale, you have internal economies of scale and external economies of scale. That just means that internal is just economies of scale that occur in your business, inside, and help you inside your business. External is stuff that happens outside your business and helps your business outside, from the outside. So, as we move on to talk about internal economies of scale. When it comes to economies of scale, overall, to sum up any economies of scale, it's lowering your average costs, okay? So when we move on to the first, purchasing economies of scale, that is the first internal economy of scale. That is when you buy in bulk in order to decrease each unit cost, which overall reduces your average cost, right? That's a key term. Moving on to financial. Financial economies of scale is when larger firms are given larger loans at lower interest rates, okay, for their operations, which once again overall reduce average cost. Now moving on to the third one, managerial economies of scale. So managerial economies of scale is when firms have more managers in
charge
to improve their efficiency, which therefore once again it decrease overall average costs. Now, marketing economies of scale. That's basically when large firms benefit from a lower average cost by selling in bulk. So if it comes to promotion, it's lower average cost. If you're a larger firm, you can promote to so many more people at the same time. So you have to less on spending on promotion. Production, you'll have many large distribution channels, so you have to spend less on distribution and more and more. Now the fifth one is technical economies of scale. Now basically, that is greater use of like your specialized capital and your machinery to produce more productively and more efficiently. Once again, that decreases overall average cost. Specialization economies of scale is when larger firms can hire specialists to incorporate division of labor, which overall reduces average costs. Now, risk-bearing economies of scale is how a firm spreads their risks through diversification, which overall reduces average costs. Now we move on to external economies of scale. So the first external economy of scale is technological progress. This is basically that machinery has advanced in the industry in order to increase productivity. So it can be like development of the internet, which helps so many businesses reduce their average cost. Now, secondly, you have the improved transportation networks. This practically allows supply chains to run more smoothly and allows customers to access your business a lot easier, which overall will reduce your average cost. Now, thirdly, an abundance of skilled labor, okay, just means that it provides local businesses with a lot more skilled and educated labor. This could increase efficiency, productivity, which once again reduces average costs. And if you want to go into specifically, it could be like training costs for if you have already skilled labor. Now, regional specialization is when a particular location is highly regarded reputation for a certain good or service. This means that they can charge higher premium prices and then they can reduce their overall average costs. Now, an example of this could be like Venice is very famous for its glass. So glass manufacturers in Venice are able to charge a premium price in order to reduce their overall average cost. This is diseconomies of scale. Now, just like a normal economies of scale, diseconomies of scale also has internal and external. So diseconomies of scale is when an organization becomes way too big to the point where it causes productive inefficiencies and, once again, the key word, overall increases the average costs, okay? So now when it comes to your internal diseconomies of scale, the first one is your bureaucracy diseconomies of scale. This is when there's too many policies, procedures, paperworks, which really reduces efficiency and increases overall costs. So, secondly is complacency diseconomies of scale. So this is basically when a firm becomes way too big that they stop being competitive against their competitors. This will lead them to make bad decisions and stuff and more, which overall increases the average cost. Now, the third one is coordination. This is when your workforce and your organization becomes too big. It takes too long to communicate between the different chains of commands and the different levels of hierarchy, which really take decision making to really increase time. And once again, overall increases average cost. Now, when it comes to external diseconomies of scale, that your first one is higher rents. So with higher rents, okay, people will have to pay more for their cost of living, which leaves them with less disposable income, which will overall increase the average cost of your organization. Secondly, you have traffic congestion. This really makes the supply channels more difficult and complex, and makes it very less convenient for consumers to get to your organization to receive your product, which will increase average cost overall. Finally, you also have higher salaries and financial rewards. So if other competitors are also raising their salaries, you as a business would be expected to, in order to stay competitive, to raise your salaries. So this basically means that it'll increase your overall average costs. This is internal growth of unit 1.5. So internal growth is just when a business grows its scale of operations and revenue by using its own capabilities and its own resources, so it's not taking anything from anyone else. Now, methods of internal growth, there are many, okay? You got firstly changing prices, effective promotion, product innovation, increased distribution, preferential credit from customers, okay? Capital expenditure, that just means spending your capital you have. Staff training, developing them, that could increase customer loyalty and product quality. Provide overall value for money. Let the customers think that they're valuably spending their money. Now, reasons you should grow internally, okay, are these 5 reasons. Firstly, you foster lots of brand awareness and lots of brand loyalty towards your brand if you do it internally, okay? Because nothing's changing except your business just expanding. You increase market share as an obvious. But the thing with growing internally, as we move on to the next one, you get to maintain your corporate culture. So all of your corporate culture, corporate practices, traditional practices you have in your environment, you can maintain that and do not need to lose that. Fourth, you also maintain control. You don't lose control to other people. 5, it's relatively cheaper and less risky than growing externally. Advantages and disadvantages of internal growth. Firstly, the first advantage is you get better control and coordination when you grow internally rather than when you grow externally. Secondly, is relatively inexpensive. So if you compare it to growing externally, it's a lot less inexpensive. Now, third, obviously I've mentioned this before, you're going to maintain your corporate culture. So that means businesses can still run normally and it won't be such a paradigm shift for your employees. Fourth, it's relatively less risky. And disadvantages. You do access diseconomies of scale if you grow too much. That will increase your production costs or average costs. Secondly, if you grow internally, that does mean you'll need to restructure your firm, okay? That will take lots of time and very time consuming. Third, it's a very much slower method of growth than external growth. Fourth, you can still dilute your control and ownership of your business to other managers and stuff like that. So this is external growth. External growth is basically just growth that involves with dealing with outside sources from the business. So methods for external growth are stuff like mergers and acquisitions, or you can write the M&As. You have takeovers, you can have joint ventures, you can have strategic alliances, and you can have franchising. So those are the 5 methods to grow externally, the main methods. Now your reasons to grow externally rather than internally is because you grow at a much faster pace, firstly. So compared to internally, you're growing at a much faster pace, which means you expand much quicker. Secondly, you diversify your product portfolio. So if we go back to the risk-bearing economies of scale, this does help you access that. Third, you gain lots of market share, a whole lot of it. Fourth, you can also gain customers in different markets. Now this links back to the diversification part, but the idea of having different markets reduces the risk for you, which is why externally is also good. Fifth, it reduces your competition as well when you grow with outside sources. So obviously the advantages we've just covered, but let's go through that again. It's relatively quicker, okay? That's a good thing about external growth, okay? But then there's also a thing called synergy. Synergy is because when you're growing with outside sources, you have the combination of all of your firm's skills and capabilities along with the outside source. Third is that you reduce your competition. So let's say you do a merger and acquisition. With that, you're reducing a large competitor, so as you get more market share and more customers. Fourth, you access large amounts of economies of scale, so you can access all of the financial, purchasing, marketing, technical, managerial, all of that. 5, it helps you spread risks because externally growing is a part of diversification, which helps you spread your risk. So now disadvantage. It may be quicker, but it is also much more risky and much more expensive to grow externally, okay? Secondly, you have a bunch of regulatory barriers. Now, basically, that just means that if you want to do a merger and acquisition with another company, sometimes the government might not let you, or else you'll become a monopoly. So that's just a regulatory barrier you have to try to avoid. Third is loss of control. When you turn into external growth, you lose control since outside sources and yourself share control now. Accessing diseconomies of scale is also a big disadvantage of external growth. But that is not just external. Fifth is you have culture clash. Now, this can mean conflict within managers, okay? But it can also mean that 2 entities have a clash in their culture, their corporate culture, which could produce different practices and different outcomes, which could be very inefficient. So, the first method for external growth is mergers and acquisitions. Now, a merger in proper terms is a consolidation and integration of 2 firms to form one legal identity. Now, to put that in simple terms, that just means the combination of 2 parent companies into one company altogether. You can think of it as a marriage where you have a husband and a wife and they come together to form one marriage legal identity together. So now we move on to acquisitions. Acquisitions is when one company buys a controlling interest over their target company with the shareholders' consent or the director. Controlling interest just means 51% to enough where they can make decisions by themselves. Now, when it comes to mergers and acquisitions, you can do this. You do this by integrating your company into different aspects of the market. So, when it comes to integration, you have 3 types of integration: vertical integration, horizontal integration, and conglomerate integration. Now, with integration, you use this graph for the different sectors of a business to help you how to understand integration. Now, vertical integration, as it says in the name, vertical, up and down, is the integration of a business or the expansion of a business from one sector to a different sector. So, for example, primary to secondary, secondary to tertiary. So for one example you can use is fishing in the primary goes down into secondary of cooking fish, as it still has to remain in the same industry. So now, horizontal integration is the idea of you're in the same sector, but you're going to a different industry. So if we go back to the fishing example, if I want to horizontally integrate, I could go into oil extraction. I'm still in the primary sector, but I'm in a different industry now, which is an example of horizontal integration. Now moving on to conglomerate integration. Conglomerate integration is a combination of both. It's new industry and it's a new sector. So let's say I'm in the primary sector with my fishing business. So then I want to expand conglomerately. I go into the tertiary sector with a gas tank company or the petrol pump companies, and yeah. Now when it comes to vertical integration, you have forward vertical and backward vertical. That's just the way you define going primary, secondary, tertiary is forward, and then going from tertiary to secondary, and then primary to secondary to primary, backwards. So now let's go into the advantage and disadvantage of merger and acquisitions. Advantage, you reduce your competition because you're combining two firms together. Another advantage, you access more economies of scale to reduce your average cost. Another advantage, third one, is you have synergy of multiple companies. Fourth one is merger and acquisitions poses as a survival strategy for businesses. Fifth, it helps you diversify your business to gain entry into new markets, which is another advantage, and extend your market share. Now the disadvantages.
Charge a faggot.
You have multiple regulatory problems with this. As if you want to do a merger, some governments won't let you do it in case you start a monopoly in that bit. Secondly, you access diseconomies of scale. So it's just the opposite. As you access economies of scale, you also access diseconomies of scale. Third, it poses lots of culture clashes. So workplace practices can be very different in multiple things, and it causes clashes. 4, in mergers and acquisitions, you will have lots of redundancies. That's because you would not need 2 heads of market department, 2 CEOs, 2 this. So it causes lots of redundancies and could pose a negative brand image. 5th, you lose your control. So basically you have 2 coming in, so you have to split your control with them. 6th, poses lots of conflict. Now this goes with almost all external growth methods. The second method is takeovers. So now a takeover is when one company buys majority stock in a target company without the shareholder or director's consent. Now this comes with advantages and disadvantages. An advantage for takeovers is very quick and very efficient. Boom, you just buy the company, you're there. Alright. Second advantage, you get access to economies of scale because you grow huge potentially, exponentially. 3, really reduces your competition because you're literally getting rid of a whole company and just making it yours. 4th, it allows you to spread your risk because you can diversify your product portfolio, and not even your product, your customer portfolio now. 5, you have an already built customer base. If you take over from another company, you don't need to start from the scratch. You have the business customer base already there. 5th, disadvantages. First, the most obvious, super expensive. You have to buy a majority stake of a company, which is super expensive. Second, you have to access to diseconomies of scale. Now this would be at a really large scale usually because now you'll have 2 big companies run. Third, it does generate lots of negative brand image, okay, which could be bad in the long term. 4th, it brings around again the problem of regulatory problems. Some governments may not let you buy a majority stock in one company due to you causing a monopoly or other reasons like that. 5th is culture clashes once again. A joint venture is the third method of external growth. So now a joint venture is basically when 2 or more firms split the costs, risks, and rewards of a business plan in order to form a separate legal entity. Now, the key word there is separate, as it's very misconcepted that it's the same legal identity, and many people get confused over mergers and takeover, joint ventures. So the key thing to remember is it's separate. The good way to link it away from mergers is think of it as the parent companies being a father and a mother. And if they form a baby, that's a joint venture. But if they get married, their marriage would be a merger. That's a good way to differentiate both of them. Now, let's go on to the advantages and weaknesses. So, first advantage of a joint venture is that it's only there for a finite amount of time. That means if things does not go well for that long, you will be able to leave in a finite amount of time. You're not stuck there forever. The second advantage is that you have lots of synergy. So you have the combination of both different parent companies or more than two to help progress the venture forward. Third, it's relatively cheaper than mergers and acquisitions. Because it's just, you don't have to deal with the whole firm, it's just a separate legal entity. And fourth is that you still maintain your individual corporate identity and culture. So this means that you don't have to risk your own firm combining with another and losing your own personal firm. Okay, you just form another entity. Now the disadvantages. It's very short-lived, okay? It's not forever, so even if it is going good, it will end at one point. Secondly, obviously, with all the external growth methods comes conflict. There's potential conflict that could come and cause inefficiencies. Third, it's very difficult to terminate. A joint venture is wrapped up in lots of litigation and legal proceedings, which make it very difficult to terminate. And fourth, but not least, profits need to be shared. The fourth method for an external growth method is a strategic alliance. Now, strategic alliance is when two or more businesses join together on a stage of production without forming a new legal identity. So they keep within the businesses and just work on a specific part. So it could be like one business helps a baking business with the kneading of the bread. So advantages and disadvantages of this is that firstly, your first advantage, you have synergy of the two companies together. All their skills, all their capabilities come together. Secondly, you retain your corporate identity. You don't lose your own business. Third, it fosters cooperation within the market rather than competition. So rather than working against your competitors, now you're working with them so everyone can succeed together. Fourth, you have large flexibility with this. It is not as legally tied as a joint venture, so it's very flexible. Now, disadvantages. It's very easy to terminate a strategic alliance. That means it's hard to retain motivation, as if something doesn't go right, you can just back out immediately. Second is very short term. Okay, so it's not that much of a long-term effect, but it's a very short-term effect. Third, obviously, once again, as I said, you always will have conflict. Fourth, in a strategic alliance, you work with the other business or firm. So maybe your employees might learn mistakes that they do and produce them in your own business. Now, the fifth method for external growth, franchise. Now, franchising is when an individual or a business purchases the license to trade using another company's logo, product, trademark, and brand. Okay? So now when it comes to franchising, you have two entities. One, you have the franchisor, which is the parent company, okay? And secondly, you have the franchisee, which is the purchase of the license. Okay, so let's talk about the franchisor for a moment. When it comes to advantages and disadvantages for a franchisor, the first advantage is that it's relatively cheaper and faster a method of growing than the other methods. Secondly, it allows you to retain a national, international presence, okay? Thirdly, you don't have to worry about HR and operations department that much in specific, because that's what the franchisee will be doing. 4, you get paid a royalty fees, okay? So that's how you earn profit off of it. 5th, franchisees are given more incentive in order to make you more money and build your brand around the world. Disadvantages for the franchisor. First, the franchisee is a risk that he damages your brand image. So they could be having poor quality in their franchise outlet, or they could just not be meeting their expectations and damage your brand image. Secondly, it's difficult to control all of the scale of operations and everyone. You should still have an oversight over everyone. It's very difficult to do that as a franchisor. Third, it's not applicable to all businesses, as it's very good for fast food chains and stuff. Fourth, you don't earn a generated profit like the franchisee. They're earning generated profit also. You're earning a small royalty fees off the store. Now, let's talk about the franchisee, the purchaser of the license. Advantages for a franchisee: you have relatively low startup costs than before. Okay. Secondly, you have a relatively low risk because the company is already built. Third, you have lots of support from the franchisor because the franchisor wants the franchisee to succeed, so they'll give him lots of support. Fourth, there's free marketing, free advertising, as the franchisor does the marketing advertising for the business to grow. And fifth, you still have autonomy as a franchisee. You're still the manager, you're the boss. It's just you're using someone else's product. Now, the disadvantages. License for franchisees are usually very, very expensive. So that's like your compliance costs are very expensive. Secondly, you have to pay royalty or else you can't keep all the profits. Third, is you have a risk of suffering from a damaged reputation of the franchisor. The franchisor could damage the reputation of the company, which therefore will damage the reputation of your franchisee outlet. Fourth, you can't use your own initiative. You still have to follow rules and regulations of the franchisor. Reasons to grow or stay small. So firstly, you gotta know how to measure the size of a business. There are numerous amounts of ways, but let me show you the main 8 ones. Firstly, you measure the sales turnover, or the market share, gross profit, or the retained profit. Retained profit is just your profit minus after all of your expenses and taxes and dividends. Then you can also look at it through the number of customers, or the number of employees, or the number of stores, or your market capitalization. That just means the value of your business, okay? So now let's move on to the reasons to grow. So now businesses have many reasons to grow. First but not least, profit maximization, okay? But let's go on to the next ones. Secondly, then now you have access to economies of scale is a reason to grow. Secondly, you get sources of finance. So profit is one of the sources of finance, and then you get larger interest and all that stuff. And then third is retention of employees. So if you're a large business, employees will want to stay with you. They would not want to leave, they want to stay with your company. Fourth, you get increased brand awareness. If you want to grow to increase your brand awareness, then there's lots more consumer trust, so they'll come back to you. 5, spread your risk, okay? So it's less risky if you fail in one industry than another. Now there are also reasons to stay small. So firstly, some owners may just want to keep their personal accounts private and they don't want to publicize everything. Secondly, they want to maintain control and ownership over their own business, and they want to be their own and contain autonomy. Third is individuality. Some businesses may want to provide more personalized services for their customers, which they can't do as a big business. Fourth is maintenance. It's very just to avoid the high maintenance costs of having a very large business. Fifth, specialization. So if you stay small in like a niche market, you can charge very premium prices and have an insane profit margin. Yeah, that's all at 1.5. Thank you.